He laughed when she prayed. He rolled his eyes when she spoke about hope. But one day, the same God she trusted would become the only one he could cry out to. Have you ever been judged for believing when everything looked impossible? Have you ever held on to faith while others mocked you for it? Then this story is for you. Because today we're diving into a story that proves that faith is never weakness. It's the quiet strength that changes everything. He mocked her faith, until God showed him what true beauty is. Before the storm, there was peace, a small-town morning, coffee brewing, sunlight dancing through an old diner window. Lucy sat by the counter, Bible open, humming softly. She didn't have much, but her heart overflowed with kindness. Across from her sat Ethan, polished, proud, successful, but empty. He thought he had everything figured out, until the day he lost everything that couldn't be bought. And the only person who saw the broken man behind the suit was the woman whose faith he once ridiculed. Today, you'll witness how grace can rebuild a heart, how love rooted in Christ can rewrite a destiny, and how the most powerful transformations begin in silence, when pride finally kneels before mercy. So stay with us, because what happens between Ethan and Lucy will remind you that no one is too far gone for redemption. Before we begin, take a moment. Subscribe to Redeemed Hearts and join thousands who believe that love stories written by God never truly end. Lucy wiped the diner counter in slow circles, the lemon scent rising like a small sunrise of its own. Outside, Main Street yawned awake. Delivery trucks hissed, a bus brake squealed, a dog tugged a kid past the crosswalk. Her Bible lay open beside the pie case, ribbon marker frayed from years of use. She whispered a prayer for the regulars by name, like laying coins of hope into God's hand. The radio murmured Motown oldies, the kind that made sorrow tap its foot. Steam curled from the coffee maker as if the morning itself were breathing grace. Lord, let me be kind, especially where it's hardest, she whispered, meaning it. Ethan Lancaster's black SUV slid against the curb like a polished answer that wouldn't take questions. He checked his reflection in the rear view, adjusting a tie that cost more than most people's rent. A calendar alert flashed. Board call at 11:30. Damage control, legal briefs pending. He silenced it with a swipe, jaw tight, eyes unblinking. Warrior mask engaged. The headline from last night flashed through his mind. Lancaster Biotech under fire. He told himself it was fine. The market respected winners, and winners outlasted storms. Winners never needed help, especially not from God. The bell over the diner door chimed, and all the ordinary sounds turned to look. Ethan scanned the room for an unbothered corner, choosing a booth with his back to the wall. He measured people the way he measured risk, quick, cold, already moving on. Lucy glanced up and gave him a smile that landed soft as a napkin on a table. He nodded once, the way you nod at a stranger who will not exist in 10 minutes. "Good morning," she said, as if it mattered, as if words could be warm bread. He didn't answer, but he didn't flinch either. Progress by inches. "What can I get started for you?" Lucy asked, pen poised like a peace flag. "Coffee," he said, the syllables clipped like a budget line item. "Room for cream?" she asked, already reaching for the small pitcher. "No," he said, then added, "please," like a man remembering he was once a boy. Lucy wrote nothing. She had a memory for simple things, and people were simple. Her eyes drifted to his hands. Steady, expensive watch, a faint tremor under the gold. She carried the tremor into prayer without telling him. He set his phone on the table, screen down, as if hiding a restless animal. A text vibrated. "PR team ready at 1, senator's aide wants a call." Another. "Your father left 2 messages." He ignored them all and stretched his smile like plastic over something broken. By the window, 2 construction workers argued about the Yankees bullpen. A little girl spooned whipped cream from her cocoa, humming, "This little light of mine." Ethan stared at the sugar packets like they owed him the truth. Lucy topped off a trucker's mug, then slid the coffee to Ethan's booth. "Careful, it's hot," she said. The obvious upgraded to care by tone alone. He tasted it and blinked, strong, honest, no frills, no apology. "Good?" she asked, not fishing for praise, just hoping for a thaw. "It'll do," he said, then added, "Thank you, because habit is a horse you can still ride." Her smile gathered the thank you like a seashell gathers tide. "Shout if you need anything," she said, not shouting. Near the register, Lucy's Bible caught a shaft of light, words glowing like a promise in a pocket. Ethan noticed the gold-edged pages and felt an old, nameless itch. He remembered a church pew, a choir robe too itchy, and a pastor who spoke like a hammer. He remembered his mother's voice, gentle, hopeful, praying over a boy who hated to need. He remembered the day he decided love was leveraged buyouts and God was a myth for the weak. But memory is a boomerang with better aim than pride. He looked away first. Flashback, 2 weeks earlier, Ethan on stage at a charity gala in Midtown. Spotlight skimmed his tux. Applause washed over him like a bonus check. A volunteer mentioned prayer. The audience murmured polite approval. He smirked into the mic. I believe in results, not wishes. Laughter rippling like champagne. Cameras caught the line. The internet loved a man who didn't flinch. What the clip didn't show was the hollowness afterward. The way applause sounds like wind in an empty room. He left with a plaque and a silence no driver could outpace. Back in the diner, a storm crawled the horizon, the kind that writes its name across the sky. Lucy glanced toward the windows, reading weather like people read texts. She set a plate of cinnamon toast under a heat lamp, a kindness on standby. Long morning, she asked Ethan, not pushing, just opening a door an inch. Long year, he said, surprised at himself for using a human word. Those end, she said softly, not promising, just remembering. He studied her as if hope were a language he once spoke but forgot. A teenage busser dropped a stack of plates. Clatter, blush, apologies. Lucy knelt with him, gathering shards with a practiced calm. Breathe, she said, no one got hurt. We're okay, turning panic into quiet. Ethan watched the scene like a case study in a manual he'd never read. When Lucy stood, a glass splinter had kissed her finger, bright bead of red. She pressed a napkin to it, shoulders relaxed, eyes unafraid. Some messes are small, she said, mostly to herself. His phone buzzed again and again until even the table felt impatient. He flipped it over, stock down 6%, blogger pushing whistleblower thread. He typed a reply, measured, surgical, sterile, and deleted it. At the counter, Lucy hummed, Great is thy faithfulness and soft as steam on glass. The melody threaded the room like a hand-stitched seam. Ethan took another sip and wondered why something inside him loosened by one notch. He hated the feeling of surrender and reached for control like a reflex. The diner door opened. A man drifted in, eyes red-rimmed, clothes damp from the early drizzle. He checked the tip jar, then the pastries, hunger learning the math of dignity. Lucy met him with a nod that said, You're seen. Sit if you want. He hesitated at the booth behind Ethan, calculating shame versus need. Coffee's on the house, Lucy said, pouring without ceremony. The man's shoulders dropped as if someone lifted a backpack full of stones. Ethan watched kindness compound faster than interest. You know him? Ethan asked, the words escaping before pride caught them. Not yet, Lucy said, but that's how knowing begins. Ethan's mouth twitched, a smile's ghost, the kind that isn't brave enough to live. He thought of due diligence reports that treated people like assets with feet. He thought of his father's favorite proverb, trust is a mortgage. Default once, pay forever. He thought of the lawsuit brief waiting to tell him who he was. Some people take advantage, he said, remembering spreadsheets of failure. Some do, Lucy agreed, and some don't. Love isn't blind. It just refuses to be cynical. He rolled the phrase on his tongue like a foreign word. Refuses to be cynical. Not sure the market rewards that, he said, almost apologizing to Wall Street. God does, she answered, not arguing, just pointing north. The rain clicked harder against the window. Dots learning to become a line. The man behind him cupped the mug with both hands like prayer that finally found a body. Ethan felt the room tilt toward mercy, and he hated that it steadied him. Flashback 4 months earlier, boardroom glass, skyline like a trophy case. Ethan stood at the head, laser pointer slicing through a future no one could afford to doubt. A junior analyst raised a concern about trial data and patient risk. Feelings aren't metrics, Ethan said, smooth as a floor with no traction. The room laughed because he was the room. On the elevator down, he typed a 3-word email, reassign the analyst. That night, he ran 3 extra miles and could not outrun the mirror. Lucy refilled his coffee, then set down a plate. Cinnamon toast he hadn't ordered. On the house, she said, for long years. I didn't, he began, then stopped, the aroma arguing smarter than he could. He tasted cinnamon butter sugar that didn't apologize for sweetness. Thank you, he said, this time letting the words own him. You're welcome, she said, like a porch light that never ran out of bulbs. The little girl by the window started humming again, and Ethan didn't mind. Lightning stitched the sky. Thunder turned the streetlights into caution. Lucy moved to flip the sign to closed if the power blinked. Ethan checked his watch. He could still make the board call if he sprinted. But sprinting had begun to feel like sinking with better branding. "Roads get slick fast," Lucy said, a weather report wrapped in care. "I've driven worse," he answered, and they both knew he meant more than roads. A siren wailed somewhere south, a reminder that every story has fragile seams. The man behind him stood, leaving the mug cleaner than he found it. Lucy slid 2 muffins into a paper bag and pressed it into his hand. "No charge," she said. "Pay me back by eating." He nodded, eyes shining with a gratitude that doesn't spend easily. Ethan's chest tightened, envy of all things at a wealth he couldn't price. On a napkin, Lucy wrote a church address and Sunday service times. "Only if you want," she said, the invitation free of pressure. "Do you always do that?" Ethan asked, vague gesture covering what he couldn't name. "Sometimes," Lucy said, "when I remember how much I've been given." Given, he repeated like the word had a locked room inside it. He thought of scholarships with his father's signature, contracts with his, and the debt that never felt canceled. "I earn," he said too quickly, and the echo sounded lonely in his own ears. "Earning is good," she replied, "but breathing's a gift even to sprinters." He sat back as if the booth had become a confessional. Flashback 10 years earlier. Hospital hallway smell of antiseptic and last chances. His mother's hand small in his. Voice a whisper stitched with light. "Don't let success talk you out of kindness, Ethan." He nodded because that's what boys do when the world is breaking in public. After the funeral, he filed the sentence somewhere beneath quarterly goals. Kindness, he told himself, was for when the fire drill ended. The fire never ended, it just changed buildings. The rain deepened, writing rain on rain, a palimpsest of weather and waiting. Lucy wiped the counter again. Not because it was dirty, but because it was hers to care for. Ethan finished the toast like a man discovering food could be more than fuel. He stood, reaching for his wallet, and paused. Cash or card felt too thin for what he owed. "Can I?" he began, then stopped, unused to unfinished sentences. "Come back tomorrow," Lucy said, solving a different math. Her smile made room for the parts of him that hadn't shown up yet. At the door, he hesitated, fingerprint smudge on the glass like evidence of presence. He looked back at the Bible on the counter, the ribbon that said someone kept returning. "Does it help?" he asked, a boy's question wearing a man's shoes. "Yes," she said, not selling, just telling the truth she lived inside. "How?" he pressed, and the storm waited for her answer too. "It reminds me who I am when the world gets loud," she said. He nodded because the world had been a siren for a long time. The bell chimed. Cool rain air braided itself through the diner's warm. He stepped outside and the city gave him back his speed. Behind him, the door closed on cinnamon and hymns and a woman who prayed with her sleeves rolled up. Ahead, the SUV blinked awake like a loyal dog, ready to run toward the next fire. Ethan checked his watch, then looked up at the gray sky that refused to be impressed. A thought rose, small, inconvenient, stubborn. Come back tomorrow. He didn't promise, but he didn't refuse. As he pulled into traffic, his phone rang, his father's name filling the screen. He let it go to voicemail, afraid of advice, more afraid of silence. The stock app bled red, but he felt something inside him bleed less. Windshield wipers kept time like a metronome for an unlearned song. He pictured the napkin in the man's hand, the address leading to pews and second chances. He pictured Lucy's finger, the small cut, the unflinching calm. He pictured himself kneeling, and the image scared him into breathing. Back at the diner, Lucy pressed a bandage to her finger and whispered another prayer. She didn't know his last name, only the weight on his shoulders and the speed in his eyes. She asked God to meet him where maps run out, boardrooms, courtrooms, mirrors. She asked for a soft landing and a holy undoing. She asked for bravery to keep being kind when kindness cost something. Then she flipped the sign to open again, because storms pass and people still need breakfast, and because grace is stubborn like that. On the highway, a billboard flashed, "Beauty is power." Ethan smirked. He'd funded campaigns with cheaper lies. In the rear view, the diner shrank to a memory the size of mercy. "True beauty," he said aloud, testing the phrase like a password. He had mocked faith at microphones. He had mocked beauty by buying its counterfeit. Now the rain drew a veil across the windshield and he felt the first tug toward truth. Tomorrow the world would test him. Tonight a prayer he didn't own began to own him. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. The rain outside had become a steady lullaby for souls that knew peace, but his wasn't one of them. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, haunted not by the headlines or the lawsuits, but by a diner waitress who had said, "Breathing's a gift even to sprinters." It echoed like scripture from a forgotten childhood, cutting through the noise of prophets and projections. His mind replayed the melody she'd hummed, "Great is thy faithfulness," a song his mother once sang while folding laundry, whispering peace into the ordinary. He hadn't realized how starved he'd been for that kind of quiet. When dawn came, he sat at the edge of the bed, eyes red, fingers still tracing the ghost of a prayer he didn't know how to finish. For the first time in years, he left his phone unanswered. At the diner, Lucy was already unlocking the door, the smell of coffee and cinnamon filling the cool morning air. She glanced toward the corner booth where he had sat yesterday, empty but somehow alive with memory. She didn't expect him to return. Men like him rarely came back unless they needed something tangible. But she still prayed, "Lord, let the seeds planted in silence find soil somewhere." A sparrow landed on the windowsill, pecking crumbs from the ledge. Lucy smiled, remembering Jesus' words about sparrows and worth, the kind that comforted her on lonely mornings. She tied her apron tighter and whispered, "Another day to serve you." Across town, Ethan parked his SUV outside the same diner. He wasn't sure why he came. Maybe to test himself, maybe to prove that yesterday's peace was a fluke. He stepped out, the morning sunlight already unforgiving, his reflection in the window a contradiction. Success on paper, hollow in person. The bell rang again and Lucy looked up, her surprise hidden beneath a kind smile. "Back so soon?" she asked, her tone warm but steady. "Coffee," he said, sliding into the same booth as if the seat had waited for him. "Of course," she answered, already pouring before he asked. He noticed the Bible again, still there, open, pages slightly curled. He tilted his head, pretending disinterest, but his eyes lingered on a verse highlighted in faint yellow. Psalm 34:18, he read aloud quietly. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." Lucy looked over, soft smile forming. "And saves those who are crushed in spirit," she finished for him. "You believe that?" he asked, a mix of curiosity and defensiveness in his tone. "I've lived it," she said simply, returning to the counter. Her words left no room for debate, only reflection. Ethan took a sip of coffee. It tasted the same, strong, grounded, unapologetic. Outside, cars rolled by, people hurrying toward goals he used to understand. Inside, time slowed, as if the diner existed in a different kind of clock, one ruled by grace instead of greed. He caught himself watching Lucy work, how she spoke gently to a child spilling juice, how she remembered an old man's order without him asking. It wasn't efficiency, it was care. Something sacred lingered in her rhythm, something that made him feel both exposed and healed at once. He wondered when kindness had stopped being profitable in his world. Flashback, 3 years earlier, Ethan standing at a podium, investors watching like hawks. He had just announced record-breaking numbers, the crowd clapping like thunder. A journalist asked if his success was luck or faith. He laughed, dismissive. "I believe in data, not destiny," he said. The room roared in approval. But afterward, in his office, he'd stared at his reflection and felt nothing. Now that same sentence echoed like blasphemy against something purer. He pushed the thought away. Pride still knew how to breathe. Lucy approached with a refill, her expression unreadable but kind. "You look like you haven't slept," she said softly. "Didn't," he admitted, surprising even himself. "Storms have a way of stirring what's buried," she replied, setting down the pot. He glanced up, half smiling. "You talk like a pastor." "No," she said, laughing lightly. "Just a woman who's seen what God can do when everything else fails." He didn't respond. But the words landed deep like an anchor in unsettled seas. A woman entered, holding a toddler on her hip, asking for change of a 5. Lucy handed it over with a smile and slipped an extra cookie into the child's hand. The mother blinked back tears, gratitude mixed with embarrassment. Ethan watched the scene unfold, realizing how foreign generosity without agenda felt to him. In his world, kindness was a transaction. Here it was currency of the heart. Something tightened in his chest, not pain but awakening. He wondered how long it had been since he'd given without expecting a receipt. When the mother left, Lucy leaned on the counter, her gaze soft but firm. You ever feel like you're running but not arriving? She asked. Ethan looked up, caught off guard. You could say that. I see it in your eyes, she said. The same storm I once carried. He frowned slightly. And how did you stop it? I didn't, she said. God did, when I finally stopped pretending I could fix myself. Silence settled between them, not heavy but healing. Flashback. Lucy, years ago, sitting in a hospital corridor clutching a doctor's report. Her younger brother, terminal illness, treatments too expensive. She had prayed, cried, begged on, and watched him slip away anyway. That was the night she almost stopped believing. But the next morning, a stranger paid her rent for 3 months, no note, no name. She found her faith again, not in miracles, but in mercy. Quiet, anonymous mercy. Now, every cup of coffee she poured carried a trace of that grace. Ethan tapped his fingers against the cup, restless. Do you ever get angry with God? He asked suddenly. Lucy met his gaze, calm, unwavering. All the time. But I've learned he can handle it. He blinked, surprised by her honesty. She smiled faintly. Faith isn't pretending not to hurt. It's trusting through the hurt. He leaned back, her words pressing against the walls he'd built with ambition. Outside, the storm clouds of yesterday had cleared, but inside, new weather brewed. Quieter, deeper. The door opened again. An elderly man entered, limping slightly, greeting Lucy by name. She rushed to help him to his seat, pouring his usual without asking. Ethan listened as the man spoke about losing his wife years ago, about missing her every morning. Lucy reached across the table, squeezing his hand. You'll see her again, she said softly. The man nodded, eyes misty but hopeful. That's what keeps me going. Ethan looked away, his throat tightening. He realized faith wasn't about not losing. It was about not being lost after loss. As the morning rush faded, Lucy finally sat for a minute, exhausted but peaceful. Ethan hesitated, then asked, Do you ever doubt? She chuckled quietly. Every day. But I choose faith anyway. He tilted his head. Even when it doesn't make sense? Especially then, she said. That's when it's real. He wanted to argue, to dismantle her logic, but something in her voice disarmed him. It wasn't persuasion. It was testimony. Flashback. Ethan at his mother's funeral, rain beating against black umbrellas. He'd stood alone, unable to cry, whispering promises to succeed for her sake. But success without love had turned into a slow starvation. He remembered her last words. One day you'll understand that the richest man is the one who forgives. At the time, he thought she meant forgiveness from others. Now he wondered if she'd meant forgiving himself. He swallowed hard, eyes burning with memories he'd buried under gold. Lucy noticed the shift in his expression but didn't pry. She only said, Whatever you're holding on to, you don't have to carry it alone. He exhaled, almost laughing. That easy, huh? She shook her head. Never easy, just possible. The words landed like rain on cracked earth, gentle, persistent, alive. He didn't know why, but something inside whispered, Come back tomorrow. And for once, he didn't fight it. That night, Ethan drove home under a sky painted with late sunlight and contrition. The city moved in its usual rhythm, but his pace had changed. Slower, quieter. He parked the car and sat still, replaying Lucy's words until they stopped sounding strange. Faith isn't pretending not to hurt. He finally understood what she meant. He whispered a sentence into the quiet, awkward but honest. If you're real, help me see what she sees. And heaven, patient and listening, took note. The morning news didn't knock. It kicked the door in. Ethan's name scrolled across every screen in the lobby of his headquarters. Whistleblower claims data manipulation at Lancaster Biotech, an anchor read crisply. Employees watched with frozen coffees and quick, sideways glances. Security buzzed him through as if speed could outrun shame. He kept his chin high, a soldier entering smoke. But inside, a boy wondered, how do you fix what truth exposes? In the boardroom, everyone spoke in numbers to avoid saying fear. Counsel laid out strategies like bandages for a wound they wouldn't examine. Deny, delay, deflect, a VP suggested, voice smooth and brittle. Ethan stared at the skyline, where glass towers pretended not to bleed. He felt yesterday's coffee and him tugging at his sleeve. Tell the truth, he heard his mother say in a room that was gone. Could a career survive sincerity? They rehearsed statements that sounded perfect until they touched air. Stakeholder confidence remained strong, he read, and his throat rejected it. Try this, PR said, sliding another line like a fresh mask. He nodded, but the nod didn't fit his face anymore. I want the unvarnished internal report, he said at last. Silence flickered. Power lost its favorite script. Was this the hour pride breaks, or becomes new? The internal report arrived like a mirror nobody wants. In red, a junior scientist's warnings, flagged, minimized, then reassigned. He remembered the elevator, the 3-word email, his own signature. Shame scraped his ribs. Regret learned his name again. Set up a call with her, he said, voice low, steady. Which one? An aide asked, already bracing for fallout. The one I ignored, he answered, and hell lost a little ground. Before the call, he stepped outside, the city breathing hot and human. A church bell rang noon. He couldn't tell which street it belonged to. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over a number he didn't save. The diner's address lived in his mind like a psalm without the verse. If you're real, help me see what she sees, he prayed again. A breeze lifted his tie like a nod. Could God find a man in a suit? Back inside, the video conference blinked to life, her face calm and tired. Dr. Yoon, thank you, he said, meaning every syllable like repayment. You cost me months, she replied, not angry, just accurate. I'm sorry, he said, the words heavy as truth and light as mercy. He didn't defend, he didn't explain, he didn't spin. What do we fix first, he asked, ceding the floor his ego built. Was repentance supposed to feel like breath? Returning? They set protocols, timelines, patient-first checkpoints that cut profits short. Board members balked, spreadsheets hissed, futures needed new math. Ethan signed anyway, pen steady as a confession. A VP whispered, Wall Street will devour us. Then let it chew on integrity for once, he answered. Around the table, a different gravity formed. Could a company learn to kneel? News broke again, this time stranger than scandal. Lancaster admits error, halts rollout, prioritizes patient safety. Comments split like oceans in a storm, mockery, relief, rage, hope. He read them all, letting each word sand a little pride away. Somewhere in the noise, a quiet thread appeared. This is what leadership should be. He saved that one like a candle against wind. Would the wind allow it to stay lit? Evening fell. Cameras clustered at the front steps like hungry birds. He could dodge them, slip through the garage, keep his voice small. Instead, he walked to the microphones with both hands empty. No statements. A handler hissed. We're not ready. I am, he said, surprising even himself. He cleared his throat, looked straight into the lens. Was it bravery or surrender at last? I mocked what I didn't understand, he began. No teleprompter, only truth. I prized results over people, applause over integrity. That ends today. A murmur rolled through lights and lenses. We will cooperate fully. We will correct our failures. We will place lives above margins. Reporters fired questions like arrows. Some found flesh. He didn't flinch. Pain that tells the truth is different. Could the public forgive what the mirror already had? Afterward, the elevator felt like a chapel without pews. He leaned against the glass, watching taxis braid the night. On his screen, a message from an unknown number. Saw the press conference. Proud of you for telling the truth. Dr. Yoon. He exhaled, a laugh and a sob shaking hands. Another text arrived, this one from his father. Call me. He typed, deleted, typed, deleted. Courage had many rooms. Which door would he open first? He drove without a plan and found himself on Main Street. The diner glowed like a lighthouse for ordinary ships. Inside, Lucy wiped a table, the slow circles that looked like prayer. He stepped in. The bell announced him like a second chance. You made it, she said, as if this was the ending and the beginning. Long day, he answered, which meant I bled and didn't die. Was there a word for learning to breathe again? He sat in the same booth. The coffee arrived like a friendly witness. You told the truth, she said, not asking, knowing. How did you— Your eyes, she smiled. They're not running anymore. He let the sentence settle like rain on a roof. I don't know what comes next, he admitted. Good, she said. That's where God writes. A thunderstorm stacked itself behind the far hills, distant percussion. Funny, he said. The sky keeps testing me. Or washing you, she replied, gaze gentle, unafraid. A teenage busser dropped a fork. Nobody panicked this time. Lucy slid him cinnamon toast he didn't order. Again mercy, again warm. He broke it, steam curling like a small hallelujah. Could gratitude taste like butter and sugar? He told her about Dr. Yoon, the report, the signatures that cost him. She listened without interrupting, reverence for honest words in her posture. Pride doesn't like open windows, she said at last. Today you opened one, keep it open. What if the storm ruins the furniture, he asked. Then you learn which furniture you never needed, she said. Was loss sometimes the cleanest kind of love? Her phone vibrated. Church group chat, a request for prayer. She typed quickly, then paused. Can I add your name? He blinked, the question as intimate as touch. Yes, he said, surprising himself with how good consent felt. What should I tell them? Ask for courage to keep telling the truth, he said quietly. How often does heaven clap for a sentence? Flashback. Boy Ethan hiding in a church stairwell late for choir. His mother found him, knelt, straightened his crooked tie. God loves the honest heart, she whispered, tapping his chest. Tonight, that memory returned like a lantern in fog. He closed his eyes, letting it warm places Data never reached. Lucy watched without prying. Some prayers deserve privacy. Was this what healing looked like? Slow, shy, and real? The door opened. Dr. Yoon stepped in, raincoat dripping, eyes wary. Lucy lit up. We prayed for a scientist today, she said. Ethan stood, a humility rehearsal, hands unclenched. Thank you for answering the phone, he said. Thank you for calling, she replied. The truce signed in quiet. They sat, three unlikely allies at a table set by grace. Could redemption form a team? They spoke timelines, transparency, and patience by first name. Lucy said each name out loud like a benediction over the plan. Ethan wrote them down, ink marking a different kind of ledger. Numbers matter, Doctor, Yoon said, but names matter more. I'm learning, he answered, and he meant it. Outside, thunder rolled closer. Approval, not threat. Would tomorrow test this vow? Closing time neared. Chairs turned upside down like folded hands. Lucy poured the last cups, then leaned on the counter. Ethan, the road ahead will be narrow, she said softly. I know, he replied, steady, small, ready. Walk it anyway, she added, and don't walk it alone. He glanced at Dr. Yoon, at Lucy, at the Bible by the register. Had God already given him company? He stepped out into the rain, not to escape it, but to receive it. Drops found his face, baptizing the edges pride had guarded. He laughed, short, disbelieving, free, a sound he barely recognized. The city didn't change, but it welcomed him differently. In the reflection of a puddle, he looked less like a headline. He looked like a man beginning. Would you stay to see how far beginnings can go? Morning headlines were merciless again. Lancaster stock plummets. Investors question his faith, his future. Ethan read it once, twice, then folded the paper like it could bleed. He wasn't angry, not anymore. Just hollow like the echo after thunder. But somewhere beneath the ruin, peace flickered, fragile yet real. He had chosen truth, and truth always charges full price. Still, for the first time in years, his conscience slept soundly. The boardroom felt colder now. Fewer smiles, more whispers. Colleagues who once praised his ambition now avoided his eyes. A former friend leaned in, voice sharp. You could have saved yourself. Ethan answered softly, maybe, but at what cost? He'd learned that silence can betray louder than lies. He no longer feared losing power. He feared losing purpose, and purpose, he was discovering, had a name: Grace. By mid-afternoon, he found himself driving again with no destination. His car seemed to remember the route before his mind did. The diner's neon sign flickered like a heartbeat in the drizzle. Lucy was there, wiping the same counter as if the world hadn't moved. She looked up, surprised but not startled. You again, she said, smiling. That must mean God isn't finished yet. He laughed softly. He must be patient. She poured him coffee, the same strong kind that didn't apologize. You look like you fought a battle, she said. I did, he replied, and I think I lost the right war. Lucy tilted her head, her eyes searching for the man behind the fatigue. Sometimes losing the wrong battle wins the right victory, she said. He exhaled, the truth of it breaking something loose inside him. Can I tell you something without it becoming a headline? He asked. Lucy nodded. This counter's heard worse. He told her about the investors, the losses, the humiliation. He told her how people once feared him but now pitied him, and how strangely pity hurt less than pride. When he finished, she didn't speak right away, she listened. The silence felt safe, not awkward, like prayer without words. Then she said, Sometimes God empties your hands so he can fill them again. He stared at his hands, calloused from work but empty of meaning. What if I don't know what to hold anymore? He asked. Then hold still, she said gently. He's not done shaping you. Her voice carried that same quiet authority he once mocked. Now it sounded like oxygen. He wondered when faith stopped sounding foolish and started sounding familiar. Lucy, he whispered, I think I'm scared of peace. That's normal, she said. Peace feels strange to those who lived in storms. Her words hit like sunlight through rain. He realized how addicted he'd been to chaos, to proving, fixing, earning. Peace was too unearned to feel safe, but maybe that was the point. Maybe grace only grows in soil plowed by surrender. Do you think God really forgives what we willingly broke? He asked. Lucy smiled faintly, eyes glistening. He forgave the ones who nailed him to the cross. Ethan swallowed hard, her words dismantling every defense left. Then maybe there's still hope for me. There always was, she said softly. He covered his eyes for a moment, pretending it was just the light. But tears have a way of telling the truth our mouths can't. Lucy said nothing. She just let him cry. Outside, thunder rolled again, familiar, almost kind now. Rain pressed against the windows, washing the world without asking. Ethan thought about all he'd built and all he'd destroyed. For years, he'd thought redemption meant rebuilding his empire. Now he realized it meant rebuilding his soul. Lucy placed a hand on the table between them. Not close, just present. It's not over, she said. It's only being rewritten. Flashback. His mother's Bible, years ago, edges marked with prayers. He remembered one verse circled twice. He makes all things new. He'd ignored it then, chasing success instead of salvation. But tonight those words came alive again, living, breathing, waiting. What if I don't deserve new? He asked quietly. Lucy smiled. That's what makes it grace. Her certainty was the kind that only comes from scars. They talked until the lights dimmed and chairs flipped. The diner grew quiet, but peace had taken root in the hush. Ethan stood to leave, then paused by the door. Lucy, he said, you've given me more than advice. She raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Hope, he said. And maybe a reason to believe again. Her smile widened. Then don't waste it. Come back tomorrow. Driving home, he passed a billboard flashing. Success redefined. He laughed aloud. God had a sense of humor, apparently. The skyline shimmered through the rain, glass and repentance intertwined. For the first time, he didn't feel small beneath it, just humbled. At a red light, he whispered, "Thank you," unsure if he was praying or speaking. Maybe both, and heaven listened either way. That night, he opened the Bible app he hadn't touched in years. He searched for Psalm 34:18, the verse from Lucy's counter. He read it slowly. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." He finally understood what closeness meant. Not distance measured in success, but presence found in ruin. Tears came again, softer this time, almost sweet. He didn't fight them. This time they were worship. As he drifted to sleep, thunder softened into rhythm. In his dream, he saw his mother smiling, holding the same verse in her hand. Behind her stood Lucy, apron, Bible, and that same light in her eyes. And somewhere beyond them, a voice whispered, "This is what true beauty is." Ethan didn't see it yet, but he felt it. That peace which passes understanding. And he knew the storm wasn't punishment. It was the beginning of redemption. He woke before sunrise, the city still wrapped in mist and mercy. Something inside him stirred, not ambition, not panic, just quiet. He walked to the window, coffee in hand, watching light stretch across the skyline like forgiveness reaching the stubborn. For years, mornings had been meetings and deadlines. Now they were sacred pauses. He whispered, "Maybe this is what you meant by new beginnings," and felt the words stay, not vanish. At the diner, Lucy stood by the window, humming softly as she refilled sugar jars. Her routine was her worship, simple acts turned holy by intention. She didn't know Ethan would come that day, but she prayed anyway. Lord, keep softening his heart. She'd seen enough miracles to recognize one in progress. Sometimes grace grows so quietly you only notice when peace replaces fear. When he entered, she looked up. Not surprised this time, only grateful. "You came," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I said I would," he replied, almost shy, like someone keeping a sacred promise. He sat at his booth, eyes clearer than before. "I read Psalm 34, he said softly. "You were right, it's not just words. It's rescue." Lucy smiled, resting her palms on the counter. "Rescue takes time, but you're walking in it." He nodded, tracing the rim of his cup. "It's strange. I lost almost everything, but I've never felt lighter." "That's the weight of grace," she said. "It removes what pride glued to your soul." He laughed, a quiet, grateful sound that startled even him. It felt good to be seen without being measured. Outside, sunlight broke through the rain clouds, streaking the street in gold. Lucy glanced out and whispered, "Look, even storms bow to morning." Ethan followed her gaze, the light catching his reflection in the glass. For the first time, he didn't see failure looking back. He saw a man God wasn't finished redeeming yet. Sunday came quietly, like a whisper that knew where to find him. Ethan woke before his alarms, the city still wrapped in first light mercy. He stared at the ceiling and realized he wasn't rehearsing defenses anymore. Instead, he was rehearsing gratitude, awkward and honest, like a new language. He dressed without the armor of a power suit, choosing simple and clean. On the counter lay the napkin with the church address Lucy had written. He slid it into his pocket as if it were a compass. The church sat on a corner where maples held the morning like a blessing. Families tumbled up the steps, strollers bumping, laughter tripping over hymn hums. He paused at the door, hand on the rail, pride negotiating with surrender. An usher greeted him with eyes that said, "You're not late, you're right on time." Inside, sunlight made stained glass into stories you could stand inside. He took a seat near the back, where questions often learn to kneel. His heart beat like a drummer finding the tempo of a new song. Lucy arrived a moment later, surprised joy passing through her face. She didn't wave. She prayed, then slipped into a pew across the aisle. Her hair was pulled back, a simple dress holding 1,000 quiet choices. Ethan looked down, unsure where to rest his hands. The worship began, and the first chord shook dust from old faith. Voices rose, imperfect and sincere, a choir of mended edges. He felt his defenses loosen like ties at the end of a long day. The pastor read from Luke 15, about the son who came home. Ethan flinched, then breathed, then let the words sit where excuses used to. "Grace," the pastor said, "doesn't excuse sin. It escorts you home through it." Ethan thought of boardrooms, of signatures, of a scientist he'd ignored. He thought of Lucy's cinnamon toast and truths warm enough to eat. He thought of his mother's verse, circled twice. "He makes all things new." Something in him nodded yes before his mind drafted an argument. During prayer, a toddler babbled 2 pews up, pure and unbothered. No one shushed him. Mercy made room for small interruptions. Ethan closed his eyes and found the sentence he'd been afraid to speak. "God, I mocked you, I mocked beauty. I mocked what I needed most." The admission wasn't elegant, but it was unedited and true. He waited for condemnation and met quiet instead. Quiet that felt like a hand on a shoulder saying, "Stay." After the benediction, Lucy crossed the aisle without hurry. You found the address, she said, a smile tucked into her voice. It found me, he answered, surprised at his own ease. She nodded toward the fellowship hall. Coffee and pancakes, Saint's favorite sacraments. He laughed, the sound freer than yesterday's. They walked together, not touching, yet somehow arriving side by side. He didn't know the liturgy, but he recognized the welcome. In the hall, Dr. Yoon stood near a bulletin board, paper plate in hand. Her face softened when she saw them, history trading its gavel for grace. Pastor's sermon was pointed, she said, half smiling. It was accurate, Ethan replied, no quiver in the truth. They spoke briefly about Monday's review and the patients on the list. Names before numbers, he said, the phrase now a promise. And people before proof, she added. We'll hold both. Lucy filled cups, then rested against a table, watching Ethan listen. He wasn't holding court. He was holding space, and that was different. A deacon asked for volunteers for a community clinic next Saturday. I can help, Ethan said before thinking, voice surprising itself. We always need hands, the deacon smiled. Bring a friend if you like. Ethan glanced at Lucy, question framed in grateful caution. She nodded. We'll be there. By afternoon, the sky turned silver, a sheet of mercy drawn across town. Ethan offered to walk Lucy back to the diner. She didn't protest. Main Street carried Sunday's quieter traffic, families, grocery bags, hopeful dogs. They passed the craft store where Lucy sometimes bought cards for widows. You're different, she said gently, not making it a trophy. Scared different, he admitted. But I don't want to go back. Then keep walking forward even when yesterday shouts, come home. At the diner, a handwritten sign hung crooked in the window. Repairs needed, plumbing issues, sorry for the inconvenience. Lucy sighed, key turning reluctantly in the lock. Inside, a faint dampness clung to the baseboards in the air. She checked the back, returned with a small frown that tried to be brave. Pipe burst Friday night. I thought it was minor, she said softly. The estimate I got this morning isn't. How bad? Ethan asked, voice careful as he set his coat aside. She showed him the paper, numbers written like obstacles. These walls have heard a lot of grace, she said, smile thinning. I don't want to lose them over copper and rust. He felt the old rescuer reflex surge, the kind that spends to avoid feeling. He exhaled it out, then spoke slower. Let me help, but not by fixing you. By standing with you. Lucy met his eyes, reading past the offer to the posture beneath it. Standing is help, she said. I'll call 2 more plumbers, compare the bids. I'll come back after the last estimate, he replied, and we'll decide together. The word together landed like a future that didn't need fireworks. She nodded, relief allowed but not romanticized. He noticed the small cut on her finger had healed to a thin line. Some wounds learned to whisper, not shout. He found his father's name on the drive home and pressed call. The ring felt longer than forgiveness, but he stayed. Son, his father answered, voice gravel and guarded love. I told the truth, Ethan said before fear could edit it. Silence, then a rough exhale that sounded like history setting down a crate. I saw, his father replied. I was proud and worried at the same time. Me too, Ethan said, and both men let the sentence breathe. They spoke about the company, about making amends the slow way. His father didn't offer a bailout, and Ethan didn't ask for one. Instead, he asked for wisdom and stories of when his father failed well. Failure teaches what victory lies about, the older man said softly. Don't waste the lesson by rushing past it, son. Ethan wrote the words on his calendar under Monday's meetings. He'd been rich in money. He wanted to be rich in counsel. That evening, the last plumber finished and Lucy texted the numbers. Ethan arrived with 2 coffees and a yellow legal pad. No cape. They compared line items, circled necessities, cut the ornamental. Go with Rivera, he said. He under-promises. That's the man I trust. Agreed, Lucy nodded, dialing, voice steady as stewardship. When she hung up, they shared a quiet that didn't need decoration. In that quiet, respect built a room and left the door open. Dr. Yoon called with Monday's agenda. Tough, honest, patient-centric. Tomorrow will be loud, she warned. We'll hold the line. Then we pray now, Lucy said, and neither scientist nor CEO objected. They stood in the half-lit diner, heads bowed, hands unlinked but hearts steady. Lucy prayed for clean water through new pipes and clean motives through old hearts. She prayed for patience by name, for truth to triumph without gloating. When she finished, nobody felt smaller. Everyone felt held. A teenager biked past, splashing through a shallow street river. He stopped, peered in, and waved because that's what Sundays teach you. Ethan waved back, an ordinary gesture that felt like healing practice. "Small things matter," Lucy said, watching the boy pedal off. "They're the doors God uses when pride blocks the big ones." He smiled, storing the line where fear had kept its coat. Outside, the sky blushed toward evening like a promise kept slowly. They put the chairs back down, not to serve food but to sit. Lucy told a story about her brother and the stranger who paid her rent. Ethan listened as if testimony were oxygen, which it was. He confessed the elevator email that reassigned a conscience. She didn't flinch, and absolution didn't pretend it was cheap. "Make it right where you can," she said. "Where you can't, carry it right." He nodded, rehearsing repair without performance. As they locked up, Lucy paused at the threshold, hand on the frame. "Thank you for not trying to fix me with your wallet," she said. "Thank you for not trying to fix me with slogans," he answered. They shared a small laugh that carried more truth than noise. "See you tomorrow, clinic sign up at 6, she added. "I'll be there early," he said, meaning the sentence like a vow. The bell gave a last soft echo as the door found closed. On the way home, his dashboard glowed with a text from an unknown number. It was the elderly widower from the diner. "Heard you came to church. Proud of you, son." Ethan blinked hard at the red light, Mercy ambushing him at an intersection. He typed back, "Thank you. Your table helped me listen." A horn behind him nudged. He drove on with slower certainty. The city lights looked less like judgment and more like gathered candles. He counted them like prayers someone else had already prayed. At his apartment, he opened the Bible app and didn't sprint. He read Philippians 1:6. "He who began a good work will carry it on." He underlined it, then laughed at himself for underlining pixels. Still it stuck, an anchor tucked into a pocket rather than a harbor. He sent Dr. Yoon the verse with no pressure, only permission. "Needed that," she replied, an exhale typed into the night. Redemption, he learned, could travel by text. Sleep came, not as an accident, but as a gift opened slowly. Dreams were no longer tribunals. They were classrooms with open windows. He woke once, whispered, "Keep me honest," and drifted again. Outside, the rain returned gentle, tapping a rhythm Mercy could dance to. Somewhere across town, copper pipes waited for Monday's tools. Somewhere inside him, stubborn pride gave up one more inch of property. Tomorrow would test the truce. Tonight, peace held the line. Morning would bring headlines, meetings, and more chances to choose truth. It would bring invoices, wrenches, and a diner's quiet resurrection. It would bring names on a clinic sign-up sheet that deserved time. It would bring a father's second conversation, and maybe a first real one. It would bring a man in a suit who came to serve, not to shine. It would bring a woman whose faith was a house with lights always on. And it would bring a question neither of them could outrun. What is beauty now? He stood at the window before dawn, city blinking awake like a patient. He pressed his palm to the glass, felt the day meet him without contempt. "I'm not who I was," he said softly, not bragging, just noticing. He pictured Lucy's steady hands and Dr. Yoon's steady eyes. He pictured pews, pancakes, and a sign that said closed for repairs. Then he pictured it flipped to open, the truest word he'd learned. Ready or not, Grace had walked back in, and he intended to walk with it. The week began with the hum of purpose, softer but stronger than before. The clinic sign-up had doubled overnight, names written in hurried faith. Ethan stood outside the church hall, sleeves rolled up, sunlight catching on his watch. Not long ago, that watch had been his armor. Now it was just a tool to mark service. Lucy arrived carrying a box of donated supplies, hair tucked under a faded cap. She smiled when she saw him, steady, familiar, not surprised. "Morning, partner," she said. "Ready to build something that lasts?" Inside, rows of folding tables waited for order to find them. Dr. Yoon organized charts while volunteers set up blood pressure stations. Ethan moved boxes, greeted people, learned names he'd once scrolled past in reports. "Mr. Lancaster?" a young mother asked timidly. "Thank you for helping us today." He smiled awkwardly, unaccustomed to gratitude without cost. "Ethan," he corrected gently. "Just Ethan." Somewhere between the coffee urn and the prayer table, pride stopped pretending it was needed. Lucy coordinated like she prayed, patient, precise, quietly joyful. When a child spilled water across the registration forms, she knelt without scolding. Paper dries, she said, dabbing the mess. Hearts don't if you shame them. Ethan watched the scene, remembering his own boardroom storms. For years, he'd led through fear. Now he was learning leadership through peace. He joined her on the floor, holding the papers as she smiled up at him. Grace, he thought, doesn't need a stage. It just needs a mop and humility. By noon, the clinic pulsed with life. Elderly hands clasped young ones in thanks. Laughter tangled with prayer. Ethan manned the donation table, logging each contribution carefully. When someone dropped a few coins into the jar, he whispered, "Every bit counts." Lucy heard him and nodded, heart swelling at the quiet transformation. She hadn't asked for his change, she'd prayed for his heart. God had answered in ways better than balance sheets. Later, when the rush thinned, they took a break outside under an elm tree. Dr. Yoon joined them, her laughter lighter than usual. "This feels strange," she said. "We're healing people without a protocol." "That's faith," Lucy answered. "Healing without needing to control the outcome." Ethan leaned back against the trunk, watching sunlight filter through the leaves. "Control was my idol," he confessed. "Letting go feels like losing. But maybe it's freedom." The wind shifted as if heaven nodded yes. A car pulled up suddenly, a black sedan, sleek, familiar. Ethan's father stepped out, suit sharp, gaze unreadable. Lucy straightened. Dr. Yoon pretended to check her phone. "Didn't think you'd show," Ethan said quietly. "I had to see it," his father replied. "The son I raised finally learning the right kind of prophet." It wasn't sarcasm, it was trembling pride in disguise. They shook hands, then hugged, both pretending it was business. Lucy turned away, giving them privacy, but her chest warmed. She'd seen many reconciliations in her life, but few this raw. When Ethan's father finally left, Ethan lingered by the road. He used to measure success in stocks, he said. Today he measured it in seconds. Lucy smiled softly, and every one of them was grace. He looked at her, something unspoken forming in the quiet between breaths. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not giving up on a stranger." That evening, they closed the clinic with worn hands and full hearts. Dr. Yoon locked up the medical cabinet, humming an old hymn under her breath. Ethan helped stack chairs, each scrape against the floor a small benediction. Lucy handed him a cloth to wipe down the tables. "You know," she said, "you don't have to prove your change to anyone." He nodded, looking at the cloth in his hand. "I'm not proving it. I'm living it." The answer came easy, like faith finally fluent in his language. Flashback. Months ago, he'd mocked a volunteer at a gala who spoke about service. He'd rolled his eyes, said, "Charity's just good PR." Now he understood what that man meant by calling. Calling wasn't a speech. It was sweat. It was showing up when no one filmed it. It was Lucy's hand passing out coffee, Dr. Yoon checking vitals by candlelight. It was truth finding feet in human form, and it was enough. The next morning brought rain again, not fierce but cleansing. Lucy arrived early at the diner to find the plumber finishing repairs. He smiled. "All fixed, miss. She'll sing again." She paid him, grateful tears close but unspilled. When Ethan showed up minutes later carrying pastries, she laughed. "You bring breakfast for the help?" "For the hero," he corrected. "This place is part of God's story now." They walked through the diner, inspecting the floors, the shine returning. The smell of coffee brewing again filled the air like resurrection. Lucy placed her Bible back by the register where it belonged. Ethan stood beside her, hands in pockets, reverent as if in church. "Do you ever think God writes stories in circles?" he asked. "Always," she said. "That's how he closes wounds, by bringing us back healed." The air hummed with truth so gentle it almost didn't need words. Customers began trickling in, faces familiar and new. A little girl ran up to hug Lucy, sticky fingers and all. Ethan bent to help her reach a napkin, grinning. "You'll spoil her," Lucy teased. "Maybe kindness should spoil people," he said. "The world could use it." She laughed, shaking her head. "Don't start preaching now." "Too late," he said, still smiling. That night, the diner lights glowed long after closing. They sat in the last booth, sharing pie, talking about purpose. Lucy told him she once blamed God for taking too much. Ethan told her he once blamed God for asking too little. Somewhere between confession and laughter, redemption filled the room. "You know," she said softly, "beauty looks different when it forgives." He met her gaze. "And when it prays," he added, The clock ticked past midnight. Neither moved to leave. Lucy traced her mug rim absent-mindedly. "What happens next for you?" "Whatever he says," Ethan answered, honest and unafraid. He'd stopped planning life like a project. He'd started following peace. "And for you?" he asked gently. She looked toward the diner window where the world slept. "I think I'll keep serving coffee until he tells me otherwise." The air softened, the kind that happens before dawn. Ethan leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've shown me what real strength looks like." Lucy smiled, eyes shining. "It's not mine, it's borrowed." He chuckled, the sound low and grateful. "Then keep lending it." They sat in silence again, not from awkwardness but awe. When grace lingers, words know when to stay still. Outside, the first hint of dawn brushed against the glass. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that mirrored light. Lucy stood, stretching, gathering her things. Ethan followed, helping her stack the last plates. "See you at the clinic tomorrow?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. "It's where mercy keeps showing up." And maybe, he thought, so did love. He walked her to her car, rain still whispering from the rooftops. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them held something eternal. "You know," Lucy said, opening the door, "you're not the man who walked in that diner months ago." "I hope not," he answered, smiling faintly. "You're what happens when God wins an argument," she teased. He laughed softly, the sound lighter than memory. "Then may he keep winning," he said. She drove off, taillights glowing like embers of grace. Ethan stood in the rain, hands in pockets, looking upward. The clouds thinned just enough for one star to pierce through. He whispered a prayer without words, gratitude filling the spaces silence couldn't. Behind him, the diner's light flickered once and stayed steady. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the story wasn't ending, just changing chapters. Because when mercy walks back in, it never walks out alone. The clinic's second Saturday dawned brighter than the first, sunlight spilling like promise. Ethan arrived early, sleeves rolled, a quiet confidence in his step. He'd started to love these mornings, the hum of service, the rhythm of grace. Lucy greeted him with 2 coffees, her smile a familiar benediction. "You're here before the volunteers," she teased, setting 1 cup in his hand. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Peace is noisy when you're not used to it." She laughed softly. That's the kind worth losing sleep for. Inside, the room filled fast, families, nurses, prayers disguised as checklists. Dr. Yoon directed the flow with calm precision, her clipboard an extension of her calling. Ethan managed logistics, welcoming each person like an old friend. For a man who once hid behind contracts, connection had become his new language. Lucy moved through the room like grace in motion, efficient, kind, unhurried. Every thank you found its way to her heart like whispered worship. But beneath her calm, something heavy stirred, a quiet burden she hadn't shared. During a short break, she stood outside, phone pressed to her chest. A voicemail blinked, a number she hadn't seen in years. The voice trembled on the recording. "Lucy, it's your father, I'm not well." Her throat tightened, memories flooding, the drinking, the shouting, the abandonment. She'd forgiven him long ago in prayer, but not in person. Now forgiveness demanded a face-to-face she didn't feel ready for. She slipped the phone into her apron, whispering, "Lord, not now. Please, not now." When she turned back, Ethan was there, reading her expression before she spoke. "You okay?" he asked, concern threaded with gentleness. She forced a smile. "Just news from the past." He didn't press. He'd learned that silence can be a shelter. "If you need to step away, we'll manage," he offered. "I can't," she said quietly. "People need help." He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe one of those people is you." The words landed heavier than either expected. Lucy blinked back tears, nodding slowly but not answering. They went back inside, she to the tables, he to the registration line. But her rhythm was off now, her smile slower to reach her eyes. Ethan watched from across the room, praying under his breath. He didn't know the details, but he knew pain when it wore humility, and he'd learned, grace doesn't wait for explanations to act. By noon, the crowd thinned. Lucy packed supplies with mechanical calm. "Talk to me," Ethan said softly, closing the storage room door behind them. She hesitated, hands trembling. "It's my father. He's sick. He wants to see me." Ethan nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. "Do you want to go?" he asked. I don't know, she whispered. I prayed for years to forgive him. Now that I have to, I'm terrified. He reached for her hand, not to lead, just to steady. Then we'll pray together. They bowed their heads right there between boxes and folding tables. His prayer was simple, raw. God, she's walked through storms for everyone else. Walk her through this one for herself. Her tears fell, not from weakness, but release. When they finished, the air felt lighter, the kind only grace can clean. Lucy exhaled. You pray like someone who's been rescued. I have, he said. Still am. And she believed him. Later that afternoon, she left town. Old roads, old fears, one small suitcase. Ethan offered to drive her, but she shook her head. This is something I have to face, she said, though her voice wavered. He respected that kind of courage. It looked a lot like faith. He stood by the curb, watching her car disappear down the hill. Lord, he whispered, give her strength to look backward without losing forward. Then he waited, praying like patience was the only work left. Lucy's father lived 2 towns away in a worn apartment overlooking a river. When she knocked, it took a while for the door to open. The man inside looked smaller than her memories, frail, eyes clouded but soft. Lucy? He rasped, disbelief and guilt twined in his tone. She nodded, unsure whether to cry or smile. I heard you're sick, she said quietly. I thought I should come. He sank into a chair, hands shaking. I didn't think you'd ever forgive me. She sat across from him, Bible still in her lap. I didn't, she said honestly. God did. I just agreed with him later. The words cracked something in both of them. He covered his face, sobbing, a sound too old for dignity, too young for despair. I ruined everything, he said. Your mother, you... Lucy reached across the table, resting her hand over his. Then let God rebuild what's left, she said. He's good at that. Back at the clinic, Ethan worked through the evening crowd, but his thoughts drifted. He caught himself glancing toward the door every few minutes. Dr. Yoon noticed. You're worried about her. He nodded. She's facing something I don't know how to fix. Then don't fix it, Yoon said simply. Pray her through it, he smiled faintly. You sound like her. She's contagious, Yoon replied. Faith usually is. As night fell, Lucy called. I saw him, she said softly, her voice trembling. Are you okay? Ethan asked, stepping outside into the quiet. I think so, she whispered. We talked, cried, prayed. It wasn't pretty, but it was holy. He closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. That's what redemption looks like, he said. Messy but beautiful, she laughed weakly. Like your first press conference. They stayed on the phone longer than planned, silence stretching into peace. I never thanked you, she said, for showing me what humility looks like. He smiled, gazing at the stars. You showed me what mercy feels like. They didn't say more. Some truths don't need decoration. When she hung up, he stood there a while, heart heavy but full. The city hummed softly, a symphony of second chances. He whispered, she's coming home healed. The next day, Lucy returned to the diner, eyes tired but shining. Ethan was already there, fixing a loose chair at her favorite booth. You didn't have to do that, she said, smiling. Yes, I did, he replied. You fix souls. I fix furniture. They laughed, the sound threaded with relief and gratitude. You were right, she said. Forgiveness hurts before it heals. He nodded. But it's the only pain that ends in peace. Business returned slowly, one coffee cup at a time. The regulars welcomed Lucy back with hugs and stories. She moved lighter now, no longer haunted by the shadow of yesterday. Ethan watched from his booth, thankful just to be part of her orbit. When she caught his gaze, she mouthed a quiet thank you. He pointed upward, answering, thank him. And for once, both of them did without words. That evening, they closed the diner together, the rhythm now familiar. Lucy wiped the counter, humming softly. Ethan dried the cups, whistling along out of tune. She looked at him and laughed. Still tone deaf. Still forgiven, he replied. They stood there, smiles fading into a sacred silence. No romance, no rush, just 2 lives redeemed in the same key. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain again. Ethan locked the door and turned to her. You okay? I think I'm finally more than that, she said. I'm free. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of that word. Freedom looks good on you, he said softly. She tilted her head. And peace looks good on you. Then they both laughed because grace always ends in joy. Later, alone in his car, Ethan prayed one more time. Not for miracles, not for second chances, he'd already seen both. He prayed for endurance, for faith that stayed steady after the story faded. He thanked God for Lucy, for loss, for every lesson born of failure, and for the first time in his life, success didn't mean applause. It meant peace. And peace, he'd finally learned, was priceless. The night settled quiet. No thunder, no storms, just calm. The city lights blinked like candles on an altar of grace. Ethan leaned back, eyes closed, breathing slow. Somewhere downtown, the diner's sign glowed steady through the dark. He smiled, whispering, "She mocked no one's faith and saved mine." He didn't know what tomorrow held, but he knew who held tomorrow. And for a man once lost in pride, that was everything. Morning crept in quietly, soft light spilling through the diner windows. The sign outside now read open, but Lucy hadn't yet flipped the switch. She stood inside, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, letting gratitude breathe. The storm that once ruled her heart had finally stilled. Her father's forgiveness had closed a chapter she never thought would end. And here, in the same place where it all began, peace waited in the details. The smell of cinnamon, the hum of life, and the memory of grace. Ethan arrived right on time, as he always did now. He carried flowers, not roses or lilies, but wild daisies, simple, real. "For the counter," he said, placing them beside her Bible. Lucy smiled, recognizing the gesture as something sacred. "They're perfect," she said softly, arranging them with care. He watched her work, thinking of how faith had rebuilt them both. Two stories once shattered, now aligned under the same author. The day passed slow, steady, familiar faces, soft laughter, endless refills. Every customer carried a piece of the story, even if they didn't know it. An old man prayed before his meal. A young couple held hands across the table. Ethan poured coffee for a stranger, unbothered by spilled drops or slow change. Lucy watched him and thought, God doesn't just save people. He repurposes them. That truth filled her chest until it became music. And for once, she let herself rest in it. As evening neared, Dr. Yoon stopped by after work, tired but smiling. "The clinic's official now," she announced. "Fully funded, thanks to both of you." Lucy's eyes widened, tears forming instantly. "How?" Ethan chuckled. "Turns out honesty attracts more investors than manipulation." Yoon added, "People believe again because they saw you believe first." Lucy pressed her hand to her heart, whispering a thank you heaven could hear. Grace, it seemed, multiplied when shared. When the rush ended, the diner grew quiet again. Chairs stacked, lights dimmed. Ethan helped Lucy close, their movements wordless and easy now. She wiped the last table. He flipped the sign to closed. It was an ordinary night, yet everything about it felt eternal. "This place changed my life," he said softly. "Not because of what I ate, but who I met." She smiled, shaking her head. "You met yourself again, and God never left." The air between them glowed with something beyond language. They sat at the corner booth where every miracle had begun. Lucy poured them both one last cup of coffee. Ritual, communion, memory. Outside, the city glimmered like redemption dressed in light. Ethan stared out the window, voice low. "I used to chase the extraordinary. And now?" she asked. "Now I see that ordinary days with eternal meaning are the real miracles." She nodded, eyes glistening. "You finally understand beauty." Flashback, that first morning, the CEO and the waitress. She had prayed for kindness. He had prayed for nothing at all. Yet here they were, living proof that mercy doesn't need permission. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small folded napkin. Her handwriting still faint, Psalm 34:18. "I kept it," he said. "It reminded me that broken things don't stay broken." She blinked back tears. "They become testimonies." Outside, rain began to fall, soft and cleansing. They didn't rush. They had both learned to linger. Ethan spoke quietly, his tone reverent. "You know, Lucy, I don't know what God has planned for us next." "Neither do I," she admitted. "But I know he's not done." He smiled, tracing the rim of his cup. "No, he never is." She looked at him, eyes full of peace that had learned how to fight. And in that silence, they both understood what redemption really meant. A bell rang from the door, a late visitor. A young man stepped in, soaked from the rain, eyes tired and lost. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Didn't know you were closing." Lucy smiled gently. "Come in. No one's ever too late here." Ethan stood, grabbing a towel and pouring coffee without being asked. The young man hesitated, then sat, shoulders shaking. "Rough day?" Ethan asked. "You're in the right place." Lucy caught Ethan's eye and smiled. The scene mirrored their first meeting. Only now, Grace was on the other side. It wasn't irony. It was legacy. God had completed the circle, using their healed hearts to heal another. Ethan set down the cup, saying softly, "You don't have to explain. Just breathe." The young man nodded, tears falling unnoticed. The same mercy that once found them was working again. Hours later, the diner was quiet once more. Lucy flipped the sign again, closed but never truly. Ethan turned off the lights, leaving one over the counter glowing softly. "For the lost who find the door late," Lucy said. He nodded. "And for the broken who think they can't come back." They stood there, shoulder to shoulder, listening to the rain. Peace wasn't fragile anymore, it had roots. As they walked outside, the street reflected the glow of their light. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Lucy asked. "Sometimes," Ethan said. "But not like I used to." She waited for more, and he smiled. "Now I let God decide what's worth chasing." She laughed softly. "Careful, that sounds like faith." "Guess I caught it from you," he said. The rain softened as if heaven approved. At the corner, they paused under the awning, just watching the city breathe. No words were needed. Gratitude did the talking. He reached out, briefly taking her hand. Not romantic, but reverent. "Thank you," he said again. The same words that had begun everything. "For what?" she asked. "For showing me what true beauty is," he whispered. She smiled, eyes full of light. "It was never me. It was always him." They parted ways there, but neither felt the ache of goodbye. Because redemption doesn't separate, but it multiplies. Lucy walked home under the streetlights, her steps steady, her heart full. Ethan drove through the quiet streets, thinking of Grace like oxygen, unseen, essential, infinite. The world hadn't changed, but they had. And that was miracle enough. The rain slowed, and peace finally found its rest. The next morning, the headline read, "Lancaster Foundation launches Faith in Action Project." He didn't chase credit this time. He redirected it. Funds flowed quietly into the clinic, into families, into futures. Lucy read the news and smiled, whispering, "He really meant it." She stepped outside the diner, the sun warm on her face. New day, same Grace, and the story continued in the lives still waiting for mercy. That night, the diner glowed like a beacon against the dark. A new verse hung by the register, handwritten in Lucy's careful script. "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion." She smiled as Ethan walked in, apron over his dress shirt again. "Couldn't stay away," he said. "Didn't think you would," she replied. They shared a laugh, soft and familiar, love made of faith, not fantasy. The tables filled again with life, laughter, and second chances. Each conversation felt like prayer disguised as small talk. Lucy moved through the room, light as hope. Ethan took orders, teasing regulars, wiping spills with practiced grace. They were building something eternal from ordinary days. Not a business, a refuge. Not a story, a testimony. Outside, the rain returned one last time, steady but gentle. Through the window, the light shimmered like forgiveness on glass. The cross above the church nearby caught the moonlight, shining steady. Lucy looked out and whispered, "Thank you for staying." Behind her, Ethan wiped the counter, humming, "Great is thy faithfulness." And heaven smiled because every word was true. Redemption had found its rest, right where faith began. Maybe you've been where Ethan was, proud, hurt, running from God. Or maybe you've stood where Lucy stood, forgiving the unforgivable, serving in silence. But friend, grace still finds people like us. It never runs out and it never arrives too late. If this story touched you, subscribe to Redeemed Hearts. Because here we share stories that prove God still writes second chances. Leave a comment telling us where grace found you. We read everyone. And remember, no matter how far you've gone, redemption still knows your name. See you in the next story, where love, faith, and mercy meet again.